I'm Tenitra Batiste, and I want to know if the Falcons defense can dominate, make it two straight, and get a little payback from Week 18 of last season.
I'm Aaron Freeman, and there's a 90% chance that Bryce Young will be running for his life this weekend.
I'm Jarvis Davis. Give me more Bijan.
Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcons Squad. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcons Squad Show starts now.
Welcome to the Falcons Squad Show, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Locked On Falcons host Aaron Freeman and Locked On analyst Jarvis Davis. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So if the Panthers are too deep, can Zach Robinson take advantage? We'll discuss. And will Briggs boys show consistency? We'll debate it. Also, are we really saying he has a chance? My goodness, we'll have to download on that. But first, let's debate on if the Falcons have a guy who can go if 24 can't. So, guys, AJ Terrell did not practice Wednesday, of course, dealing with that hamstring injury he sustained just before halftime of the Vikings game Sunday. And Coach Raheem Morris said that AJ is week to week. So, Jarvis, since it's likely the Falcons have to prepare for life without Terrell for a while and at least for this weekend, should they bring someone in, or do you think the Falcons know who they need in-house?
I feel like they have who they need in-house because here's the thing. One of the things that I really appreciate about this defense is that they're deep. They're loaded. Like if you're talking about a third round pick from last year and Braylon Trice, people aren't even thinking about him anymore. Just from an edge rusher standpoint, like they have some guys. And then, when AJ Terrell went out the game, you didn't see any big plays. Justin Jefferson didn't start all of a sudden going off and, getting loose and all that stuff. So I feel like, I have the confidence and the depth that this team has built. Man, what I'm talking about depth on the defensive side of the football for the Atlanta Falcons in 2025. I feel like I'm in a outer realm of worlds right now when it comes to talking football. But I think that I don't think that the Falcons are pressed like they normally would be if they lose a guy of AJ Terrell's caliber. Not saying that they're not going to miss him. Yeah, they're going to miss him. However, there are some guys that they can put in there and you're not going to be like, oh my gosh, why did they go sign someone? Because, you saw that once he went out, like you mentioned before halftime, and you were able to, still dominate up front. So that's the main reason why I'm confident that they're not going to go out and get one.
Yeah, and Aaron, when you look at the stat line for AJ Terrell so far this season, 8 solo tackles, 2 passes defensed, it may not look like a stellar stat line per se, but AJ Terrell, we know, can be flat out disruptive. So it goes beyond just what he brings from the stats perspective, and also a leader on this team, a leader in the secondary, a leader on the defense that you kind of lose. But that said, it's a hamstring injury that you're hoping maybe just with some rest, just like we talked about with Jalen Walker. Sometimes those are the injuries where you're just going to have to rest the person and so that they can at least get back and be 100%. We saw what that looked like, or have seen what that's looked like for Jalen Walker for a couple of games after some rest. But with AJ Terrell, do you feel like, my goodness, with all that he brings to the table, former Pro Bowler, how do you replace him? Do you do it in-house or do you go outside?
Well, what AJ Terrell is a number one corner. And,
yes,
I don't think the Falcons have a number one corner also on their roster in addition to them. And I don't think in the middle of September, you're going to be able to go out and find a number one corner on the streets unless you want to go out there and get, Stephon Gilmore, if you still think he's got, something left in the tank at age 35 at this stage in his career. So it's one of those things where I just think you you're just kind of stuck with what you have in house, and you just hope that you can kind of tread water at that position in the intervening weeks. I think Terrell and McMillan has looked really good in his first 2 games, and I'm like, we got to deal with this guy. Mike Evans, we're about to get this guy out the paint, and then here come Emeka Egbuka and Terrell and McMillan to have to deal with for the next 7 to 10 years or whatever. So not looking forward to that. But that he's going to be a real challenge for this secondary this weekend. You got Terry McLaurin. We know how good AJ Terrell was against Terry McLaurin last year, coming up in week 4. And then you have Buffalo and San Francisco coming at the bye. Then you have the Miami receivers after that point. So, AJ Terrell is going to be instrumental. I don't know if you're going to go out there and sign somebody that's going to be like, oh, okay, well, he's going to go down and lock down Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in week 8 or whenever the Falcons play the Dolphins. So to me, it's just kind of, you just need to get AJ Terrell healthy at this point. You trust, hopefully, with the billion corners that the Falcons have in Clark Phillips and D. Alford and CJ Henderson and Kobe Bryant and Billy Bowman, all these guys, and just like, we'll just throw enough of these guys at the problem, and something hopefully will stick at this
Natron
point.
Brooks. Don't forget about Natron Brooks too.
Natron Brooks. I knew I was forgetting somebody, and I was like,
I know your favorite is Kobe Bryant. I know you had to mention him.
Yeah.
Don't forget about Natron.
Yeah. The Mamba mentality. Yes, here on the Falcons Squad Show. I think, so I just think you kind of have to just figure it out with the internal options, just because you're not going to find a solution. Like, I know Asante Samuel Jr. is out there, but he's more of a zone corner. The Falcons have been specializing more in man coverage. He's coming off a neck injury, so like his status is up known. So there are options out there, but I don't know if any of them are really going to solve the AJ Terrell sized hole in your defense. And I think, as Jarvis said, you're just going to have to rely on the pass rush. And again, a crazy statement to make on a Falcons Squad Show. You're going to rely on the Atlanta Falcons pass rush to make up the difference for the intervening weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. And maybe you kind of piecemeal it even through like this week, taking nothing away from the Panthers wide receiver core, but just saying, with the games that you have coming down the gauntlet, you kind of want to see if you can give him even a week's rest. Might be something that is useful down the road. But you guys kind of alluded to it, so I want to go back to what you said, Jarvis, about what second half play looked like, and also what second half play calling looked like. So what do you see, or what did you see that was effective in terms of who Jeff Ulbrich used in replacement of AJ last week against the Vikings, but also how he used his players and how he decided to scheme in that second half? What did you see that you thought was effective? Who did you see that you thought was effective that you think can be effective again in AJ's absence this weekend?
I think a guy like D. Alford is a guy that can be effective, because here's the thing, like, pass rush makes corners better. I think that's a fact, right? Like, and there are some people who can argue that, oh yeah, great corners can help the pass rush get there, and I will never subscribe to that, because I'm a former defensive lineman. So yeah, like it starts up front, and that's in all categories and all phases of the game. So for me, I feel like the defensive line is going to be charged this week to say, hey man, like, you lost CB1, like Aaron mentioned, so you guys going to have to turn it up a little bit more. And with the waves of guys that the Falcons have, I don't understand, like, how did we get here? I'm talking about multiple guys that can get to the passer. This is like I'm just happy right now, man. I don't know about y'all, but on a Thursday, I'm talking about multiple guys being able to put their hand in the dirt and say, oh yeah, get Leonard Floyd on this play. Hey man, you can get Brandon Douglas on this play. Oh, you can get, don't forget about Rook, Oh yeah, don't forget about Jalen. Oh, don't forget about James Pierce Jr. It's just so many guys that they can pull from that, if those guys are rushing in sync and having that rush discipline that I talked about, that they didn't necessarily do that well against Baker Mayfield. If they do, they probably get a dub, in that game. But we saw how they were able to basically take JJ McCarthy's soul on Sunday night. So for me, I feel like that's the type of stuff that has to continue. That's the type of stuff that, Jeff Ulbrich is can deploy, in AJ Terrell's absence. Not necessarily the caliber or talent of the guys that they're lining up outside corner in his space. It's the guys that he has in the stable that he can deploy on third and long. And that's when you're going to need a guy, you need those guys the most, because you need to be able to get those guys to get that quarterback, get the ball out of the quarterback's hand as quickly as possible.
So for Jarvis, it sounds like, Aaron, it's about how Jeff Ulbrich schemes up front and how those guys execute to help the back end more so than it is about who or how Jeff Ulbrich will scheme the secondary or who he'll put in place for AJ Terrell. So for you, is that more what you're looking at as well? Like part of the success that you saw in the second half of last week's game had a lot to do with what was going on up front that allowed even any leakiness that could have happened on the back end to kind of be covered because the front end did its job.
Yeah, the Falcons against the Vikings played a lot of quarters in that game, especially in the second half, to try to guard against the deep ball. And obviously having, after Justin Jefferson put the fear of God in them for that 50-yard play right before halftime, it was like, okay, let's make sure we got as many guys back deep as possible so that we don't, break this thing wide open. And so, playing that, I think will help the Falcons in the weeks to come, just to sort of, guard against, whoever, the Panthers and Commanders and whoever else have at those wide receiver positions. And I think Jarvis is right, where you're just going to rely on that front to get home and sort of force the ball out quickly. And I think being aggressive with some of the blitz looks and the stunts and some of the things that you can throw at some of these teams, particularly Carolina this week, where they're down 2 starters on their offensive line at center, with Cade Mays stepping in for Austin Corbett and Chandler Zavala stepping in for Robert Hunt at the right guard position. And I watching the first 2 games for the Panthers, the other day, like it did feel like teams were pretty effective getting after the quarterback by using some of those twists and games and stunts up front. You saw our guy, Calais Campbell, get a sack at the end of last week's game against Arizona to kind of seal that win, where he was able to take advantage of that new look right side with Zavala in at the right guard position on like a twist to sort of seal that game. And hopefully you can see more of that for this Falcons team. I think they've been very effective at that. That was, I think, a big part of why they were able to get so much pressure against the Vikings, by being able to confuse that offensive line and take advantage of it with the injuries that they were dealing with last week. So I think if the Falcons just keep, pushing that button, play some zone coverage, have deep help for these cornerbacks, on the back end, Jesse, don't cheat. So I know you, we know what Jesse likes to do.
Yes.
And so let's play it a little safer these next couple of games, Jesse, while we deal with this AJ Terrell game, and just trust in the guys up front in order to make the plays, as opposed to the guys on the back end making those plays.
Now, JD, did you see anything that was a big concern? I think that, yes, we would all agree that the defense played solid, especially in substitution and support of AJ Terrell being a no-go in the second half. But did you see anything that maybe concerned you, whether it was the way Jeff Ulbrich schemed the second half in AJ's absence, who he schemed in AJ's absence, that you definitely don't want to see this week?
Well, the only thing I want to kind of go back to like the preseason for a second, because I remember in one of those games where the team was they were playing against, they were running like a lot of 12 personnel, and the Falcons got caught a nickel quite a bit. But I one thing that I saw that I really liked, and we talk about those in-game adjustments and the game plan coming in, and the difference between preseason and regular season, like game planning. Okay, we're trying to get a good look and see what we can do in this particular with this personnel group in against that particular lineup. They actually made the adjustments in this particular game, because when Minnesota was in at too tight 12 personnel, like on the same side, and they ran that motion, you immediately saw Caden Ellis coming down from that off-ball linebacker to that outside linebacker. Then you had that big nickel personnel with Zach Harrison, and at the end, he slid down into that 4-eye, and you had that a 3-4 look, going on. So that adjustment was to make sure that they are stout against the run, and if they do run it, but they're still able to have the right personnel to have a guy like Divine Diablo still sitting back there waiting and ready to roll, and a guy like Billy Bowman who's back there, doing his thing as well. So I just love what Ulbrich is doing. So that was my major concern in the preseason, given the situation. So now you see the game plan, and now you see the adjustments in game, and especially when you have a guy that's going to be out like AJ Terrell, those in-game adjustments are going to be vital, because what I don't want to see is what happened last year, like you mentioned at the top of the show. We don't want to see that.
Yeah, for me, to me, the individual matchups on the back end are probably the main concern. Just you have a lot of small corners in the Falcons room, and you're dealing with some big wide receivers, as I mentioned, Tetairoa McMillan, very, very large human being. Xavier Legette, who's off to a slow start this year, but also a very large human being. You have the sort of wily veteran slot receiver in Hunter Renfrow. There was some couple of times where Billy Bowman gave up some deep opportunities for the Vikings. I don't know if you'll look at Hunter Renfrow as a field stretching sort of slot type, but it'll be interesting to sort of see how Billy Bowman handles the sort of quickness and some more of that underneath sort of classic slot receiver in Hunter Renfrow this week. So to me, I think some of the matchups aren't necessarily in the Falcons' favor, from, a Mike Hughes, a Clark Phillips, D. Alford, these guys on the outside going up against some bigger Panthers receivers. So that's my only concern. If we're seeing, the Falcons pressure get there and just Bryce Young just kind of throwing up 50-50 balls to Ted McMillan down the field and him just mossing dudes. And it's like, well, there's not really a whole lot that we can do to stop that unless you can, put some platform shoes on D. Alford or something like that to get him to grow like 7 inches or something like that to make up the difference between him and some of these wide receivers. So that's my only concern in terms of the back end. And you just kind of have to hope that, your defense goes out there and executes. And so that is not a major issue on Sunday.
And to add to what Aaron is saying, this may be one of those scenarios where you see a CJ Henderson get caught up because he is a bigger, those are one of those things where you have that depth, right? So, okay, we got a lot of big boys out here, and we don't want to get, mossed up, so to speak, when it comes to those, those corners getting tried on the outside like that. So I think we might see CJ Henderson because of that fact, because it's about matchups, right? And it's the week-to-week thing. And I think that CJ Henderson might be able to play his way and get that call and be one of those guys to go out there and try to, stop this young group of wide receivers.
Yeah. And, thinking of on the flip side, if the Panthers too deep on the defensive side of the ball, can Zach Robinson take advantage? We'll take that under further review. This episode of our Falcons Squad Show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. That's a good look. And what you'll love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it. So think about this. I know for me, I kind of like the berry flavors, but hey, you might have a favorite flavor that you like. Ultimately, one of the things I like about 5 Hour Energy is it's refreshing, and it gives me a quick lift before a busy day, and I don't feel like there's that crash later. I think that's so critical because I've got this show today, and then I've got a game to call tonight. I can't afford to have a crash. So I love also that it kicks in quickly and it is sugar-free. So enough with the boring flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. So Aaron, Zach Robinson talked about how surprised he was at how deep the Vikings safeties played throughout the game Sunday night. So if this is a look that you think the Falcons will see against the Carolina Panthers, how can Zach Robinson in this offense take advantage?
Yeah, I don't know if the Falcons will see it to the same degree that they saw it against the Vikings, where, I think Brian Flores' defense is really sort of one of these quote unquote new look defenses that is really predicated on, we're going to play two safeties deep and we're going to take away the explosive play from your offense. And we trust in our ability to throw a lot of different things at you up front to sort of make up the difference. And unfortunately for the Vikings, they did not quite make up the difference in the ways that they needed to, particularly in run support. And Carolina's defense, from a schematic standpoint, is much more similar to what the Falcons were running a year ago, where they're going to have more cover 3 looks. And so that's going to have one of those safeties a little bit more impactful in the run fits. And so I don't think you'll see it to the same degree that you saw it last week, where Zach Robinson, I think, kind of spoke to this, and it's like, oh, well, we'll just keep adding 2 tight ends to the blocking. And, because we're going to always have a numbers advantage with the run game now, because you're not going to drop that safety down. Like, we'll just keep running it down your throat. And you saw the Falcons do that. I don't know if the Falcons will have that same success trying to do that against the Panthers, just because I think schematically their defense is a little different. And they also have, a guy by the name of Derek Brown up front that is basically similar to Villa, like the Falcons saw week 1, who's kind of a large, stellar entity known as a black hole when it comes to the run defense. So I think it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge schematically, but obviously I think the Falcons will find ways to try to exploit this Panthers defense again, because it's very similar to what the Falcons were running a year ago. It feels like it's improved, because last year's Panthers defense was one of the worst defenses in NFL history. If you look at certain numbers, they look like a functional NFL defense. They're not a good defense, but they're not like historically bad, right? They're just like a normal below average to bad NFL defense. And so I think that's going to be something that the Falcons should be able to exploit. But, it's going to be a little different, I think, just because I don't think Carolina is going to be as committed to their philosophy of like, we're going to stop the deep ball and drop our safeties out of the box or whatnot. I think they're going to be a lot more intent coming off of the Falcons' 218-yard performance against the Vikings. The Panthers gave up 200 yards in week 1 on the ground to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think they're going to make a much bigger commitment to trying to stop the run. And so I think it'll be a little different. And so this does create, I think, some opportunities maybe for the Falcons to get the vertical passing game going for the first time this year, given how Carolina I expect will play it.
Yeah. And Jarvis, Zach Robinson, like I said, talked about how surprised he was at how the Vikings just kept leaning in to having their safeties play so deep in Sunday night's game. But if you look at that, do you think this is a look that maybe they'll see a lot against the Panthers? And if so, I mean, how can the offense take advantage of it?
Man, I look at it like this, with all of these new schemes and all this stuff nowadays, talking about taking the deep ball away. My defense coordinator right now is probably cringing when they hear me say some crap like that, because this is old school ball. Like, this is nothing new. Take the run away, make it one dimensional, and then we'll figure it out from there. So I feel like, based off, because here's the thing, like, that's why these primetime games matter for the Falcons. That's why it's good for them to show well, because teams gonna start paying attention. Like, a lot of people are paying attention to Bijan Robinson right now. A lot of people are paying attention to Bijan Robinson, like whatever you want to refer to him as, right? So I feel like once you see them establish what they did, like, because they were dominant, like in the run game, they were dominant. Like when you have that many rushing yards, as a team against a team like the Vikings, whose defense coordinator is very well known for having putting good defenses out there, regardless of who the personnel is out on the field. Yeah, people are going to start paying attention. So I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think that they're going to see the safeties that high, right? And I feel like if, as a defensive coordinator, Giro Vero is going to say, you know what, I'll take my chances with those deep balls. And, Darnell Mooney is still a little banged up a little bit. He's getting himself back acclimated. Drake
so
London is not the fastest guy.
Yeah. And he's not 100% either.
Right. And he's not 100% either. Then I have JC Horn. So, yeah, I can go, hey, bro, that's you. you want to be the number one guy? Like, yeah, there you go. Take 5 away, and then we'll figure out the rest with Darnell Mooney. We'll roll coverage over there with Darnell Mooney. So, yeah, I think that, given how they played and how much success they had on Sunday night against the Vikings, I feel like they aren't going to see those safeties back that deep like that because – even though Caleb McGarry is gone, like I said, the foundation of this offensive line is still there. You only lost one dude. You lost 2, with Drew Dahlman and all that stuff, but that was before the season. So now that Ryan Newsel is in there, you see Matthew Bergeron and Jake Matthews and Chris Lindstrom played an amazing game on Sunday night. So I love the fact that they're establishing who they are and what they want to do. They challenged this offensive line, Dwayne Leffert and company, Raheem Morris, everybody was like, hey, man, we have to run the football. So those guys took that challenge and they succeeded. Now, defensive coordinator is going to look at that tape and say, you know what? Hey, we just going to take our chance with a young quarterback, but we have to get these guys up off the ground. Like, you make an offense one-dimensional, your chances of winning the football game go up for me.
Indeed. And Aaron, Jarvis put it out there. No matter what you call him, Bijan, like he calls himself, Bijan, like his mama calls him, Bijan Robinson is that dude. We heard from Saquon Barkley during Sunday night's broadcast talking about just how special he is. But Raheem Morris and Michael Penix Jr. took it a step further and came out this week saying, hey, we agree that we believe he's the best player in football. Do you agree?
I mean, I want to say yes. Right. But like he has the ability on any given night to be the best player in football. Indeed. Right. So I think that is true. And we talked about this during the summer when we were, in our much dreaded list season where all these different lists were coming out and, why certain Falcon players weren't getting enough love on the lists. And basically the conclusion I think we all reached back then was like the Falcons have to win games in order for people to recognize the quality of the players that they are. And so I think you saw that with Bijan having a dominant performance on Sunday and in a win against the Vikings. And people are like, hey, this guy's really good. He's one of the best running backs in the NFL that you haven't heard of. Yeah, Saquon and, Derrick Henry got a lot of love. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey gets a lot of love. The reason for that is not only they're all very excellent running backs, but they also play on teams that are, playoff contenders, Super Bowl contenders, all that stuff. Yes. And so basically all I'm saying is like, yes, I want Bijan to be in that conversation, but it's less a Bijan issue and it's more again, Atlanta Falcons. If you can keep winning games, then yes, I think we can have that conversation in earnest about Bijan being the best or one of the best players in football. But if the Falcons are staring at, an 8-9, 9-8 type of season, I don't think we're going to really be having that conversation in earnest by year's end. So, right now, as the Falcons coming off a win, yes, this past week, best player in football. If they win again this Sunday, okay, we can keep that conversation going. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
I think the fact that we're asking this question tells us all we need to know. Like, I can't sit up here and say that he's the best player in football. The first guy that came to mind, and there's a lot of bias here, Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is very, very good at football, and that man can take over a game, and he plays for the Cleveland Browns, and people still have to look at him that way. Like, you have to think about the level of talent that this dude has. He's just so amazing. But with that being said, I think Bijan Robinson, I got to get used to saying Bijan. Like that's I ain't gonna get into that. We ain't gonna go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, Bijan is a special player, and I think that, like you said, like the more that the Falcons have these good showings on primetime football, that narrative is going to change. And people are going to put him in that conversation. We're not going to be just asking a question just because the coach said it.
Exactly. And I think it's kind of tough because, like you said, Jarvis, you can go all over the place. You can go to the defensive side of the ball and you can make the case for Myles Garrett, right? And then, of course, it's a pass-happy league. So you can make the case for your last two MVPs in Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, and, of course, MVP right behind them, Patrick Mahomes. So it's kind of tough. And also Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry having an impact on winning teams. But I suspect, as Aaron said, if the Falcons keep winning, especially if they're winning with their run game, or it's a complementary or a balanced attack between run and pass, I think that he vaults into that conversation and you can make the argument for him. I just wanted to touch on one thing that I thought was an interesting comment that some people may not realize, but GATX, I guess that's Georgia Texas boy, said, how do we know Mooney's still hurt? What if the game plan was Cincinnati was since Minnesota can't stop the run, like keep running the ball? Yeah, that's a part of it. But the reason we know that is because whenever players are in limited participation for practices, that's kind of the indication. So we, as analysts, get these reports starting on typically Wednesdays of each week. And Darnell Mooney was limited in his participation on Wednesday. So that tells us he's likely not 100% because otherwise they'd be practicing him at 100%. And then sometimes players will practice at full percent. So Drake London wasn't on limited participation on Wednesday, but we know that injury happened in week 1. So in all likelihood, and just what the eye test gave us in the Minnesota Vikings game, there's probably, I'm not saying that he's 70%, 80%, but just probably not 100%, but certainly a good point that you make. And we appreciate you as always, as one of our faithfuls. So how does Brick's unit show consistency? We will unpack that in Next Up. This episode of our Falcons Squad Show is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every single day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. So with football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. So if you've been playing Prize Picks lately, you know it's fun. And you know it's something you want to stay locked in for the season. And it's quick, it's easy, and honestly, it's going to be your favorite way to follow along with football. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. And you probably will have a cool time checking projections. So last week's projection was on Saquon Barkley for more or less than 1 rushing touchdown. Might want to give that a good look for Bijan Robinson this week. So again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup for Prize Picks. It's good to be right. So Jarvis, the Falcons defense was as potent as we've seen it Sunday night against the Vikings. It's probably why you are still floating on cloud 9. And it was really able to dominate in the trenches, particularly just kind of taking the Vikings O-line. And you feel like they were just throwing them all around the yard, if you will. So what does Jeff Ulbrich need to do? We talked about this. If you guys caught the Monday Squad Show, you know I said my number one thing in relationships is consistency. It's the number one thing I also want to see when I'm watching a team I cover. So that's what we're looking for now. Can you do this again so that we know that this is not a fluke? But what does Brick need to do in scheming this defense against the Panthers this Sunday to show us they're for real?
So I have another, I want to continue your relationship analogy, T, if y'all can follow me for a second. That was an amazing first day, essentially. That was a coming out party for the defense, right? Let's just say that was the first day. First day, right? Cool. Went amazing. Y'all did everything. Y'all went out, had a good old time, great conversation. Now that you set the standards, Jeff Ulbrich, players on defense, like what you gonna do now? Like, how can you live up to that first day? Because that first day was so amazing. You don't want a big drop off, right? So we understand that you went all out. You went all out to impress the Falcons fans. You know what I'm saying? Like you just went all out your way. You just laid out the red carpet, rose petals, all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? If y'all even got to that point. So what are you going to do now? And I think the thing that they have to do now, like we talked about earlier with AJ Terrell being out, that's more pressure on their defensive line. Those guys have to get after the quarterback. I want to see, if Caden Ellis has an opportunity to get a pick six, take advantage of it. Xavier Watts, Billy Bowman, those guys, got their first career picks in this last game. So not necessarily picks. Can you do some breakups, pass breakups? Can you make a big play on third down? Like, can we see Jordan? Where is Jordan? He ain't took the ball away yet. If you would have told me come to the season that Xavier Watts would have a pick before Jesse Bates, I would have looked at you like you was crazy. So yeah, I think it's a matter of living up to the standard, not necessarily putting those type of numbers out, because that was ridiculous. 6 sacks, man. If they start doing that every game, I don't know what I'm gonna do with myself. I might do a show with my shirt off. I don't know. It might be one of those. Don't duck your head free. Don't do that, man. You know what I'm saying?
You putting visual images in my head that I don't
right, that you cannot erase, right?
Like,
what is this?
Well, I guess I need to implement a pause in there when I start doing a show with my shirt off. But anyway, I think that's the thing for them to continue to do what you did last week, with the expectation that more than likely you're not gonna give you 6 sacks and have multiple picks and turnovers and all that stuff. It's just we want to see and feel that it's the same. That showing that you had last week.
Yeah, because that could look like, Aaron, maybe not 6 sacks, but let's look at what the deeper numbers look like, right? Are there those QB hits, or are there those pressures, if you will? They matter in terms of ensuring that you knock Bryce Young off the block and you don't allow him to get rhythm with his receiving core. Also, if you're making him scramble, I mean, we know he can scramble a little bit, but I don't know that we consider him necessarily a top tier mobile QB. So I think, those are some of the things that you can do this week that may not show up perfectly in the sack column, because seeing 6 sacks 2 weekends in a row is probably diabolical and probably not really realistic. But it's the things that maybe Jeff Ulbrich can do to scheme and get you in the ballpark of feeling like your defense, your pass rush in particular, was still effective.
Yeah, maybe not 6 sacks, maybe 4.
5.5.
Four, a realistic number.
Not 4? The rose petals. But can we get the? You know what I'm saying? Can we get the red carpet?
Get
the red carpet. Yes.
Get the champagne. Get some tiramisu going. Wine and dine. With 4 sacks. I think both you guys
playlist, baby, you know what I'm saying? 90s R&B, specifically, you know what I mean? Like, come on with it.
I think, as Jarvis said, like, all right, I won't speak for everybody here, but I went into the season with low expectations for the defense. I was like, they're going to be better, but I don't know if they're going to be good. And now, based off of the first 2 games, it's like, oh, they actually might be good. And so now, as Jarvis said, the standard is being raised, where it's like you're going up against this Panthers team that is by no means an offensive juggernaut, that has struggled these first 2 games to get going offensively in the first halves of games. And then they've sort of made it interesting in the second halves of games. And sort of you want to see this defense be like, okay, well, this is not going to be your get right game in the first half of a game. And then when you're one dimensional, because hopefully our offense is up big in the second halves, like Jacksonville and Arizona were, our defense is not going to let you back into the game as you've been able to do, because we're going to be able to get that pressure on the quarterback. And so the standard now is set much, much higher for this Falcons defense. And so can you get after the quarterback? Can you keep these receivers in check? Can you make this not be this sort of typical back and forth divisional game And as you said, T, like, yeah, Bryce Young is not a dangerous runner with the football, but we saw in that week 18 game, he had 2 touchdowns off of scrambles, right? We saw this team struggle against Baker Mayfield dealing with the mobility of the quarterback. JJ McCarthy had a couple of nice runs last week, but fortunately the Falcons were able to get him down on the ground before he was able to really gash them. And so these are kind of the expectations now where it's like, okay, I don't want to see Bryce Young scrambling for a 20-yard gain. I don't want to see, I want to see Bryce Young, as you said, whether it's, 2 sacks or 6 sacks, I want to see him get hit half a dozen times. I need to see him on his backside, multiple times. I need to see that pressure rate up in the 40s, 50s, and 60s as they have been the first couple of weeks. I want to see some turnovers on the back end. I want to see you get stops in the red zone. I want to see you be able to stop this run game. So now the standard is much, much higher. And I think if they can, live up to that standard, then we can have a real conversation about, hey, forget what Aaron said at the beginning of the season. Like, this is a legit good defense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, Jarvis, we have to think about the differences and what that might look like just in terms of the depth that you mentioned. James Pierce, I know we talked a lot about the depth on the secondary, but I think you've been very pleased with the fact that there's depth even up front. And that's something the Falcons may have to take into consideration because James Pierce Jr. missed his practice this week with that groin injury. And that's something that's a little nagging, similar to a hamstring type of injury. So if he can't go, because right now he's listed as questionable for the game Sunday, I mean, what's the concern there? Because of course he got his first sack, albeit a half a sack, but he has a half a sack. And I think we talked about the fact that in game 2, even if the numbers don't belie it, he was still more disruptive than we saw him be in game 1. So how concerned are you if JPJ can't go Sunday?
I'm not that concerned because he had this same issue, leading up to the Vikings game. So for me, I look at it as they're being, proceeding with caution, precautionary, whatever, with the guy like James Pierce, and I totally understand that. So that's what I'm gonna take that as. So, but if there's a situation where he does not play, I feel like they can still get through it because of the waves of guys that they can throw at people, right? So you might have Zach Harrison rushing a little bit more off the edge in certain situations, given how the Carolina Panthers are going to try to attack him, because we know they're going to try to run the football with Chuba, because Chuba has had success against the Falcons. He didn't necessarily have that much success, like recently. I mean, he's had success against the Falcons recently running the football, but I think that, when you look at how things have played out for the Falcons defense this year, and with AJ Terrell being out, there may be a scenario where Dave Canales might try to take advantage of that, right? So you got to be prepared for that as well. So for me, I think this is one of those deals where they're being precautionary, but if he does not play, if it's more serious than what they're kind of putting out there, and we know how the Falcons are when it comes to injuries and stuff, like, Raheem get a little slick with the tongue, when it comes to these injuries and how they're going to play out. So, I feel like the Falcons still will be able to function as a defense and be able to throw guys out there that are going to be productive.
Yeah. And we started to see an uptick in JPJ's play last week. Very encouraging to see the rookie do what he did. But on the same token, you want to be careful with it too, because you have some very critical games coming up after that Panthers game where you need JPJ at his healthiest. But are you concerned about, well, 2 things. Number one, because Jarvis put it out there, so just to kind of talk about it, the real severity of the injury. And number 2, are you concerned if he can't go just for this week?
Not overly concerned at this point in time. I think right now you kind of nailed it, T, where you want to be precautionary with these groin injuries, and sort of if he needs, to take some rest days or whatever, so that he can be in a better position to give, closer to 100% effort on Sundays, then you got to do what you got to do during the week so that you can maximize what he can do during the weekends. But I think as you put it, like, the Falcons have enough depth at this edge rusher room, even though JPJ, I think, has been kind of their lead guy when you look at, the number of pressures and the win rates and all that stuff. it feels like, Leonard Floyd's coming off a really good game against Minnesota. Jalen Walker was also able to flash some. We know Caden Ellis can bring the juice. We haven't really seen Arnold Ebiketie get fully unleashed. I think he's flashed abilities not only as a pass rusher but also as a run defender as well. So if you're limited with James Pierce Jr., I think you have enough bodies there that those guys can step up, and especially given the way that the Falcons have been utilizing JPJ, he's been primarily more of that DPR, that designated pass rusher on obvious passing downs, rather than the true every down player. And so I think everybody else that you have, also offers maybe a little bit more every down value, a little bit more run defense. Zach Harrison, Brandon Doris also getting some of those reps at edge on some of those early downs. So it's really that third down situation where I do think if he is going to miss the game, you're going to miss him. But again, going back to the conversation we've been having, I think you can scheme up some things, use those stunts, use those twists, bring those blitzes with Divine Diablo and Caden Ellis, maybe have Jalen Walker line up over the guard as we saw him do a couple of times these first couple of games. Just different things that Jeff Ulbrich can scheme up to make up whatever that difference is of not having that guy that James Pierce Jr. has been these first 2 weeks, that has been a guy that in obvious passing situations has reliably gotten home at the quarterback after the quarterbacks these last couple of games. So I think the Falcons have enough to make up, but ultimately, if it's 3rd and 7 and you're looking for a guy that's going to be able to get home, I think JPJ has been that guy pretty impressively for this team early on in the season. So you are missing a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be some massive drop off where it's like, you're losing a Myles Garrett, you're losing a TJ Watt type of player that it's like, oh, well, what are we going to do now type of thing. I don't think we're there yet. I think that speaks to the depth that the Falcons have right now.
And you know what else I think this speaks to, Aaron, which is kind of like a compliment again to the consistency that we're starting to see with this defense, is that you are seeing JPJ have that opportunity for 3rd and long because of what the Falcons are doing on 1st and 2nd down. So hopefully you see that, and then you get the opportunity to see who else can actually take advantage when the Falcons put the Panthers in those situations of 3rd and a mile. So when the Falcons find themselves in a situation like they found themselves last week, where they had to make a decision in what Jarvis would say as his first choice or his other choice, they went with other choice and it worked. But are they saying we still have a chance for first choice? Oh, we'll tell you about it when we go and look ahead. This episode of our Falcons Squad Show is brought to you by Mazda Standard. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. So Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August of 2025. And from footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details, we know. So Mazda brings that same intention to how they craft every model, and you can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. So like our players, we sweat every detail. Mazda sweats every detail too, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Again, we sweat every detail on our Falcon Squad Show. We know that our players sweat every detail that we cover in these Atlanta Falcons, and Mazda does the same, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. So, Aaron, Coach Ross said there is a 90% chance, not 100%, go figure, but a 90% chance that John Parker Romo is the kicker this week against the Panthers. I know this is your boy, and I know that you want Lil Scrappy to get his shot. Well, 100%, not 100% for Parker
and
Romo.
You gonna be a head buster, T?
Okay. I gotta be nice, because hey, we said we were going to love on Free because of what's going on with Young Wei.
Yes.
So
yes.
Free it sounds like they're saying
leaving mental health on the show.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna show free love because they're saying his guy has a chance, at least a 10% chance. But come on, free 5-5 kicking last week from Parker Romo, and we still got a 10% shot at coup. Are we concerned here?
No, I mean, going back to what Jarvis said, like you got to read, you got to read between the lines with what Raheem Morris is saying. Stuff like he says things, right? Like they're going to have a competition this week, right? They're going to continue that competition going on, but we know
in air quotes.
Yeah, we know who's going to be the kicker this week, but you gotta keep up appearances. You got to give Younghoe Koo, given the sentimental value, he's got to feel like he's got a fighting shot, otherwise what's the point, all that sort of thing. So it's Raheem saying Raheem stuff. It's coach speak 101. It's like, yeah, we know Parker Romo is going to be the kicker on Sunday. But you got to go out there and say like, oh no, it's going to be a competition. And you want it to be a competition, right? Like that was right. That was the main complaint we had going into week 2, which is like there wasn't a real competition all summer long. And then it's like, well, you had a competition last week. Romo seemingly won the competition, and you're like, well, you can't have a competition anymore. Like you can't go back on that. So it's like you got to keep reinforcing like we're having a real competition. So you say 90% chance that Romo's going to be the guy, but hey, there's still a chance for Younghoe Koo to redeem himself. You just got to go out there, do you, Younghoe, go out there, try hard, and you got a 10% shot at winning this job back or whatever, just so that you can have this ongoing competition. But like, yeah, we know the answer to the question. It's just Raheem saying stuff. Yeah,
just to say something. Okay, Jarvis, I'm going to give the analogy that kept rolling through my head as Free was talking, but don't you go down the rabbit hole with it. It just kind of felt like
the 90s.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah.
Don't. The
go ahead, T.
Example, I felt like it was Ross saying to his soon-to-be, in a relationship example that Jarvis would give, the soon-to-be ex-girlfriend, like he just wants to like let her down easy, but really he's moved on. He is a new girl. He's just trying to let the old ex down easy, Jarvis.
Yeah. So he hasn't quite blocked her yet. You know what I'm saying? She has moved to the block phase because she was cool. You know what I'm saying? They used to kick it. Good time together. You know what I'm saying? But someone else came along and started doing those things that she wasn't willing to do. And
like kick 5 field goals,
gravitate towards that type of stuff. You know what I'm saying? So, you may even had a conversation with like, hey, I need this in order for this relationship to continue. You know what I'm saying? And she still weren't willing to give that. You know what I mean? So that new woman has given him that, and he's moved on. Now she start getting crazy, start running the mouth. She might get the block. You know what I'm saying?
Which to Free's point might be why you say that there's a 10% chance, because just in case it goes sideways with Romo, then you want to still make sure that Koo feels like he's still loved on and he's still appreciated. But for me, I was like, come on now, why are we even considering like 10%? But I do understand sometimes it's posturing, because you do have to look at the bigger picture in case this was a one-hit wonder situation, because Parker Romo's situation was a little unique, right? I mean, he used to kick for Minnesota. So this is the perfect opportunity for you to put him in an environment that he's perfectly comfortable in. And once he gets the jitters out from the first kick, then after that, it just becomes a snowball effect in a good way, right? But I say that to say, I don't think we're going to have much of a conversation about the kicking game, because I feel like when you look at keys to the game, Aaron, you really do
hold on. Before you go, keys, before you might be able to segue what I'm about to say. Speaking of keys, I think John Parker Romo got a key to the crib. You know what I'm saying? Rodon gave John Parker Romo a key to the crib. Like, so he's good now. All you gotta do is just continue to do what he's doing. He's gonna be all right. So so hey man, John Parker, shout out to you, bro. You went and earned that key. You know what I'm saying?
Keys to the crib.
I gotta offer a key after one. Never mind. We ain't gonna go.
Because we're gonna go from keys to the crib to keys to the game, because keys to the game are so important. And whether Romo has keys to the crib or not, I don't even think it matters this week, quite honestly. Because if we saw if we see what we saw in week 18 of last season, this could very well be a high scoring game for the Falcons. I think their defense is better, so I don't think it's going to be as high a scoring game for the Panthers. But Free, give me your one key to the game in order for the Falcons to get a W come Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it with the offense. Maybe we can get this passing game going in a major way this week. And I think the key to that is getting them off to a fast start.
Yes.
We got that opening drive touchdown against the Bucs last 2 weeks ago, but that wasn't like, oh, we Zach Robinson wasn't like, I got this perfect 50-yard play. You just throw a check down to Bijan Robinson and he's going to make 3 guys miss and he's going to score. Now, Bijan makes you right? Like that's the type of player that he is, where it's like, we can just throw a check down to Bijan and it can go for a 50-yard touchdown. But like, you didn't design that. That wasn't part of the game script where it was like 50-yard touchdown, third or fourth play of the game. That's what we're cooking up. So, they got off to a good start, but it was mostly just like Bijan just putting the cape on and like, let me go do my thing and let me go walk on water real quick. Check me out real quick, guys. I'm gonna just do some water walking real quick. But I think if they can get off to a better start this week, that will get this thing going, and we can see the type of game that we want to see from this team. We want to see the 38 points that we saw in week 18 against that Panthers defense. And then we want to see this new look defense, shut down the Panthers offense. Instead of scoring 44 points, they only score 14 points or something like that. So I think if the Falcons offense can get off to a good start and keep the pressure on Carolina and let the Falcons defense do the thing that they are good at. Again, it's a crazy thing to say. Good at doing, rushing the quarterback, getting the quarterback on the ground. Like, are we living in the Twilight Zone? What is going on?
Yeah, listening to it sounds crazy, man.
But like, if we can get off to a good start, I think that's going to be the key. So if offensively we can go down the field and then put some points on the board when they get into the red zone with a touchdown, I think that will be a huge part for the Falcons to get off to the start that they need in order to get the result that we want.
And Jarvis, somewhere in my mind, I feel like that has been an emphasis for Zach Robinson this week.
Sure.
I think that they understand that it is so important once they get into the red zone to really not settle for the field goals, really be aggressive and try to get after. But I like what Free said about getting after it early, not just having success in the red zone like we saw in that final drive Sunday night, but let's have that success early and then just kind of see the Falcons build on that success. But for you, key to the game.
Oh, it has to be, this team has to perform the way it was built to perform. Yeah. Meaning all of the draft equity that they've put onto the offensive side of the football, quarterback, double quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, running back, like super running back, like all of those things need to go into place, because to be honest with you, Carolina's not a good football team. Like, make them look like a bad football team. And you do that by getting up early, like Free talked about, and you getting that defense into pass rush mode. And we're not scared of it. Like, see, like, I can't believe that we're having this conversation. So yeah, I think that, this team was built to play with leads. So let's play with a lead. Let's see what that looks like. Let's have a party. Let's have a sack party. Like, I want to see that. Like, everybody taking turns. Like, oh yeah, boy, it's sweet over here in the right guard spot. Woo, woo. It's center spot, Cade Mays. Oh yeah, I remember when he was at Georgia. Then he left, transferred to Tennessee because he couldn't deal with that heat anymore, or he didn't want to deal with it, what Kirby Smart had going on down there at Athens. So yeah, these are the type of games that you say, all right, we know we're on the road. We're going on the road. That crowd is not as rambunctious as Minnesota. Like, I think that's safe. That's fair to say, right? Or it might not be there at all. A lot of people, Falcons fans, are saying they're going to travel up there because there ain't nobody in the stadium anyway. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think that this is one of those games where it can be a mid crowd and you can get lulled to sleep. And if you get lulled to sleep, Bryce Young going to carve your butt up. So yeah, they need to play how they were built to play, and that is playing with the lead, offense getting out quickly, and making that offense one-dimensional so you can turn loose those pass rushers.
Yeah, and you're right, Jarvis. I've actually spoken to a lot of Falcons fans over the weeks before leading up to the season that talked about this being a great road trip. So yeah, I think they can kind of turn it into a little bit of
Clean
a
seats
home
available,
field.
T.
Yeah, like yeah, Bank of what is it? Bank of America Stadium open for
Yes.
business.
Yes.
So, Free, real quick before we wrap up, Free, when you think about this game, I know, as Jarvis mentioned, Panthers are not a good team, but it would represent the first divisional win of the season for the Falcons. And so, how important is this game? Maybe not like a must win game, but maybe can be a bit of a statement game nonetheless.
Well, yeah, I think you got to, if you got to get a win. Like, so it is kind of a must win game. Like, you can't afford to lose to Carolina, go into a 0-2 hole in the division in a very, 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 very winnable game. So yeah, it's a must win game in that sense. But yes, I agree with you, T. Like, the expectation is that the Falcons are going to find a way to win, and you want to see a statement win. Obviously, walk away with a win however you need to walk away with a win. If it's ugly, if it's it's like, oh, it wasn't ideal, you got to get it done somehow, some way. But I think, as we've been discussing all day long here on the show, like, you want to see this team sort of with the standard being set. You want to see that sort of impressive type of win and that sort of statement win where it's not as contested as a usual divisional game is, where it's back and forth and we're sitting here sweating bullets in the final 5 minutes of the game. We're like, oh, well, what's going to happen? All that stuff. You don't want to see that happen, but this is typically how these divisional games go. They're a lot more competitive than we like to want them to be. But I think absolutely, like, this is a golden opportunity for the Falcons to get a statement win, to basically say, yes, we are in a different tier of team than where Carolina is at this stage. And, that sets you up very well for a big home game, another rematch next week against Washington.
Yeah.
And I think that, just overall, like, I feel like this is a statement game, can be a statement game for the defense, or should be a statement game for the defense. Show people that they sorry. like you said, this team hasn't looked good. Bryce Young at least look like he's capable of being an NFL quarterback. And we saw the end of last year. Yeah, you give him time, he's gonna cut your butt up. So I think this is the chance, another opportunity for the defense to say, hey, we here. It's different. No more James Lake. Yeah. So let's go out here and get this dub and be the team that the numbers are looking like unbelievable. Let's continue to make those numbers look unbelievable as you go through this early part of the season.
Indeed. So thanks to our everydayers for making the Falcons Squad Show your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen, and his frequent contributor, Jarvis. See you next time.